Hello and welcome to Alien Places, the show where I ask my guests which three places they would show an alien visiting Earth to give it a sense of the key issues facing human society. And I'm really happy to be joined by Bella Lack here today. She's a youth conservationist, she's a youth ambassador for several different environmental charities. She's recently done a TED Talk in Brighton. She's the youth director of Reserva. And really, I think of her as kind of the Greta Thunberg of biodiversity. So, Bella, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So can you tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do? We sort of summarise you as a youth conservationist, for example. What are the sort of different organisations that you've worked with in the recent past?
So what I do mainly is campaigning for biodiversity, wildlife and animal welfare. And I began originally working with the Born Free Foundation. I'm an ambassador for them, and I work as well with the RSPCA and Save the Asian Elephants as an ambassador. But really any organisation, for example, National Trust or RSPB, I'm doing things with at the moment. So I'm making it more UK based. I'm trying to do more about UK biodiversity because I think that's a really overlooked topic. We're quite tokenistic about saving wildlife abroad and then we forget about the wildlife on our doorstep. So I'm moving more into local action as well.
Yeah, that's great. And if anyone hasn't heard Bella talk, she's an excellent speaker and really goes straight to the heart of the issue. So, thanks for all the communication that you've done and all the brilliant talks that you've been doing to raise awareness of biodiversity and what humanity needs to do to improve our situation here on Earth. I was really impressed with your TED Talk in Brighton, and I just wanted to talk a bit about that before we get into your three places, because I think there's conceptually some similarities between the way that you approached your TED Talk in Brighton and the concept that we're talking about today of alien places and thinking from a different perspective. And I really liked what you did in that TED Talk around imagining it's the year 2050 and it's you talking to your children about what's happened to wildlife and biodiversity on Earth. Do you want to tell us a bit more about kind of the reasons for taking that approach?
I use the approach of it being 2050 speaking to my children because I think we need to have that wider perspective and also think about the impact on future generations because I know many people are thinking about the economic impact, for example, but I wanted to really start with something which I thought would be hard hitting, which I thought would engage people emotionally, because lots of, you look at the statistics and people are quite detached from the environmental crisis. It feels like something quite intangible. So I wanted to begin and immediately reel them in and immediately have that emotional perspective. And obviously what could be more emotive than thinking about the future generations who are going to come after, who are going to be inheriting a much more deprived planet than we have at the moment.
Yeah, that's really important. And of course, for those that don't know, you're 17 years old at the moment, is that right?
Yeah.
I
I
think
know I
it's
look
great.
about 12, so.
I mean, it's important to have a young person on alien places as well, because one of the ways of communicating environmental issues is as intergenerational issues, and climate change and the loss of biodiversity is an intergenerational justice issue. Because, I mean, quite frankly, the situation that we're in, it's not your fault. It's not the fault of the youth generation, people that are born sort of after the year 2000, because by definition, you haven't had the opportunity to be in positions of political power and things like that. And so you've been handed a world which is massively depleted and is right on the edge of runaway greenhouse effect. And this is not the fault of the current young generation.
Yeah, there's an intergenerational aspect. Then there's also the aspect of equity with different countries having different responsibilities, which I think we'll speak about a bit later. But it's also important to not. Lots of the narrative has been about pointing fingers at specific generations, and then obviously there are the anomalies. There are many people within each generation doing all they can, and then there are many people who are being as destructive as they can. So I think it's more about the individual mindset and the individual approach rather than large demographics of people, because there are always the exceptions. And I found the more that you generalize and the more you pinpoint, then the harder it is to reach people and the more that they sort of back away and don't listen.
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of people of all ages doing great work. I mean, we've obviously got David Attenborough and the likes of
Hmm.
Chris Packham, people of all ages are doing everything that they possibly can as well. Okay, let's get into your three places then. So you've had to think about the three places that you would show an alien visitor coming to planet Earth. So what would be the first place that you would show an alien?
So the first place, we're going to start on a good note. It's called Paradise Lake in Marsabit National Park in Kenya. And for the last 6 months, I've been filming for a documentary, and it's called Animal, and it's all about solutions and hope. And what we were doing is traveling to find solutions to the sixth mass extinction, to meet people who are on the front lines. And one place we went to is this Paradise Lake, um, to meet the rangers who are working there. And this lake is at the bottom of a crater, surrounded by the most dense, lush jungle. And as we were sitting there, many of these white butterflies were sort of sweeping across the lake, and there was a troop of baboons, and it was one of the most beautiful, surreal experiences in my life, really. And I think I would take an alien there. I know people are probably expecting me to take them to really destroyed habitats to shock them and show them what we've done. But I think it's so important that we remember what we have left and remember what we have to fight for, and how tragic it is that we're destroying this very small bubble of life which we have in sort of a universe which lacks life. I mean, now I'm speaking to an alien, but as far as we know, we haven't found life in the rest of the universe, and we spend time looking for it whilst we have this incredible diversity on our planet. So I would show this alien Paradise Lake because I think it's one of the most beautiful, diverse, and lush places on the planet. And yeah, I think that's important, not only for the alien but for humans as well, to remember what we're fighting for.
That's great. Yeah, it's great to start off with a positive place where the alien can see the breadth of diversity and biodiversity in one place. I love the image of baboons alongside butterflies, and the alien and you kind of running around in that kind of environment. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was really we watched as the sun goes down, and as many people know, in Africa there's sort of a golden glow in the evening, and the frogs were croaking, and it was really, I'm not religious at all, but if I was religious, that would be the epitome of heaven, really.
Yeah, it's sometimes hard to convey in words, isn't it? How special those warm evenings are. I was lucky enough to go on a geography field trip to Kenya doing my A levels, and yeah, the atmosphere is just so special. And I'm really glad that you've taken the alien to a really special place to begin with. And what about a song and a film to play the alien at that place in Kenya?
The song is "What a Wonderful World" by Louis Armstrong, which just goes along with the theme of remembering how special it is, what we have left, and what an anomaly it is, what a wonderful world it is. And the film is Demain, or Tomorrow, by a director called Cyril Dion, who I have to say is actually the director of that film Animal I'm working on. But the reason I chose Demain is because it's all about solutions and hope. And he's working on creating a new narrative. And I think just as the place I took the alien to shows that we have hope because there are still these remnants of untouched, pristine wilderness, the film shows us that there's hope because there are people all around the world working on the solutions, who have the solutions, and we just need to uplift those voices. So I try a lot to uplift those slithers of hope as well as showing people the destruction, because as humans, we need to feel the rage and the despair, but it's not sustainable. We also need to feel the hope and that there is a chance to turn things around.
Absolutely, it's that mixture of emotions, isn't it? We need a certain level of anger to actually get us motivated and to accurately reflect the reality of the situation. But equally, we need to be able to visualize the solutions because just like athletes before races, they close their eyes and visualize winning the race. We have to also do that with the environmental solutions. We have to visualize and see on screen what the solutions look like. Otherwise, we won't be able to bring them into reality. So that's great that you've shown the alien.
And that's one problem at the moment, because the whole I would say the environmental movement spends a lot of time denouncing the system and a lot of time criticizing, but we spend very little time envisioning what the future could be like, which is why the film Demain or 2040, another film, they focus on creating that vision of the future, something which we can move towards. And you probably know a lot more than me with your scientific background, but I know psychologists say we have to have sort of a place to move towards, a bit like if you need a destination to navigate towards that, and we need to create our environmental destination if we're going to navigate towards it.
Absolutely, yeah. We need to know where we're going and why we want to get there. Otherwise, we never will get there. So it's good to be really clear about where we're going. I have a phrase actually which I call "clarity motivates," and in the book that sort of writes up the world tour that I did with the Alien. I wrote the Alien a poem called "Clarity Motivates," which personifies clarity. And some of the things that we talk about in the poem are around having a deadline and working backwards from there. And so having a clear destination and then working backwards to put the steps into place to get to that destination. So thanks for that first place, Bella. So what would be the second place that you would show an alien visiting Earth?
Just as much as the first one was sort of symbolic of hope, I think the next one is more symbolic of what we're losing. And it's an island called Kiribati between Australia and Hawaii. And the island is one of the smallest emitters of greenhouse gases in the world, and yet they're already having to migrate because of sea level rise. And I think I would take the alien here to show how disproportionately people are being affected and how tangible and current the problem is. I say problem, it's not even, I don't think the environmental crisis can even be diminished to a problem because it's something so overwhelming. It sort of consumes all of our other problems, and the other problems stem from it as well. But anyway, I would take the alien here to show it the human effect. We often think environmental crisis, we think of polar bears, we think of orangutans and tigers, and then we forget about the humans who are not only the future generations but the ones who right now are having to migrate because of the climate crisis, who are losing thousands of years of culture as they have to leave their tiny island to move somewhere else. And actually the former president of this island purchased land, has purchased land already, because he predicts that within the next few years, within the next decade, they're going to have to move the whole population. And I just think that's tragic, and it's something the alien, but also, you know, all of us humans have to recognize that whilst many of us are very fortunate to be thinking about the fate of our children or grandchildren, some people right now don't even have the privilege to just think about the future. They're just focused on survival.
Absolutely. So this is about sea level rise and the direct cause and effect between climate change and the ice caps melting and thermal expansion of the oceans and people losing their homes and drowning right now. This is an issue right now. And when the alien and I were traveling the world, the alien was often reminding me that human lungs are not designed to be filled with the floodwaters of melting continents. And this is what's happening. We are melting our ice caps and the sea levels are rising. And we're not designed to live in a water world. We need our land. It's one of the basic resources that we need.
I think it's really interesting that people are having, well, I say interesting, it's tragic as well. People are adapting in amazing ways to the fact that it is becoming more of a water world as some of these islands. But yeah, as you say, it's not feasible for that to happen completely. And yeah, we have to be aware that this is happening in the world as well.
And what about a song and a film that you would show the alien in this place?
Okay, the song is In the Anthropocene by Nick Mulvey. And the reason In the Anthropocene is obviously now that's the scientific term. Well, it's becoming a scientific term for the epoch that we're in, because scientists think that in the future, if a geologist far in the future looks back, they'll see the human remnants in the geology. And I think that aligns with the fact that Kiribati is going underwater, because it just shows how potent our impact is and how much we have to change.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the interesting things about when people talk about the Anthropocene, I think, is when they talk about how the whole of human civilization may end up being reduced to one thin geological layer characterized by plastic. So, you know, all our civilizations, all our history, all our emotions, and all the people that have ever lived in terms of geological time could just end up being represented by that one thin layer of plastic. And it's the Earth that's going to keep living on, but it's humanity that's got to worry. And I think that's what's on the mind of the alien as well, is that the alien's not necessarily so worried about the planet itself. The aliens come to visit because it's really worried about humanity. And
yeah, that's the funny thing, because many people say we need to save the world, but the world is fine. You know, it's us. Environmentalism is really much more about, it should be humanism really. It's much more about saving humans and obviously other life as well. But the world, as you say, is fine. And it is quite humbling to think that the souvenir of humanity could be one thin layer of plastic. And I think that's what we have to think about. What do we want our remnants to be? And I definitely don't want it to be plastic. And you know, how long will we survive? And if we continue to act in the way we are, as we see with Kiribati, it won't be very long. But if we change and if we transform, then I think, you know, great things can happen.
Absolutely. When I was chatting with the alien about environmental policy, the alien said to me, you know, why are you calling it environmental policy? Why aren't you calling it existential policy? Because actually this is about the existence of humanity. And, you know, even environmental policy is potentially a misnomer. You know, maybe a better word for it is existential policy. And that song that you've chosen, Into the Anthropocene, is a good reminder of that. So what about a film that you would show the alien?
Oh, yeah. So it's a very small independent film called A Noti's Ark, about the former prime minister who I mentioned, and it's about his struggle to save the island and then to adapt, and then when he has to purchase land as well. So it's really about his struggle to save this population, and it also follows families locally. And for the film, because it's so small and independent, you can only stream it online, you can purchase it online, so if you want to watch it. So obviously this is, but it's just really incredible to see it from that perspective and realize the intersectionality of it, how I think we need to think a lot more about the intersectionality of how different countries are being affected and how disproportionate emissions and effect is, because you know, the countries with the highest emissions are being affected the least at the moment. It will change, we will all be affected, and many of us already are.
Yeah, it's that justice issue again, isn't it? It's not just about the people that are causing the pollution which are paying the price for it. It's about the people that are causing the pollution and not paying for the price of it, and it's primarily other people in island nations who are suffering the most. Okay, should we move on to our third place then? So what would be the third place that you would show an alien visitor?
So the third place is a wet market, specifically in the context of the current times in Wuhan. Because I think for people, obviously now we're in the midst of a pandemic of coronavirus, and we all know it's a zoonotic disease. It originated from non-human animals and came to humans. And I think the wet market, more than anything, is just symbolic of our relationship with nature. And it sounds really trite and obvious saying this, but up until now we've really put ourselves on a pedestal, and we've been thinking that we're exempt from being affected by our actions. And now I think many people, as we sit back and we're forced to be in our homes, we're really rethinking our relationship with nature. Many people realize now more than ever how much we rely on being outside and the natural world. And we're realizing that because this virus came from an animal to us, we're bound by these natural laws. And it also applies to the environmental crisis more generally. If we continue, we're not on a pedestal, and if we continue to act in the way we are, then we're going to be affected. And I think, that's why I chose that place. And obviously, I say a wet market in China, but I don't want to pinpoint one country, because it happened to originate in China this time. But the exploitation that caused the virus to happen is happening all over the world, and scientists think that 70% of emerging viruses now are zoonotic, and the reason that's increasing and the statistics getting larger is because more deforestation is happening and more infringement onto wildlife habitat. And the more that we go into the habitat of wildlife, the increased the risk is of contracting diseases and getting viruses. So that's a really important link which people are making and need to make as well.
Yeah, it is really important to make that link and not shy away from talking about these issues, because this is all part of how humanity relates to wildlife and the environment in general. I mean, the idea of climate change being related to deforestation has been well known for decades. But this is an example of the way that humans deal with the natural world being a very immediate negative impact on humanity. And we've got the long-term impact of climate change and loss of biodiversity. And we've got the short-term, immediate, catastrophic impact of things like coronavirus. And we need to talk about these things, because there's no point just not talking about it. So thanks for being brave enough to kind of mention this and to show the Alien this is your third place. But of course, it's not just about this one place, is it? As you say, it's about our relationship with wildlife and with the natural world. The disease could have come up from any country in the world, in theory, that was behaving with wildlife in the same way that happens in the wet markets of China.
Mm-hmm. And I hope the Alien will see, although we seem to have sort of populated the Earth, we seem to be many people see us as the dominant species, but actually we're very vulnerable. And just from one person eating a bat or a pangolin, I actually don't know. Do you know which species it originated from? Has that been confirmed?
I think they're still working that out. It's still part of the research. I think they're saying that it's definitely from wildlife. So I think that's a definite. Exactly which species, I think they're still kind of trying to finalize that one.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it came just from one person consuming a wild animal which they shouldn't be consuming shows us how vulnerable we are. And I think we do still have hope. Saying that, it sounds quite terrifying to realize our vulnerability, but I think now that many people are realizing it, there's a lot of hope, because our level of vulnerability hasn't changed, but the fact we're realizing it means that hopefully we'll be more cautious in the future and we'll be more aware of how we treat and interact with other species.
Hopefully we've learned our lesson. And I think with the Alien perspective, the other aspect of the Alien perspective which can perhaps help us here is that an alien visiting Earth wouldn't necessarily look to humanity as being the top of the food chain, the most dominant species, the most successful species. From an alien's perspective, it might be the virus. The virus is more successful.
For all we know, the alien could have come to meet with coronavirus, not us.
Yeah. Well, the alien said to me that it came to visit in 2019 because it saw 2019 as the turning point of humanity. And it could have visited in 1819, or it could have visited in 2119, but it felt that 2019 was the turning point of humanity, and that is when the coronavirus started off in China, as you say, and as we know.
Can I ask you a question, or is that allowed?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Do you think that this will be the turning point? I mean, I wrote about some of this in my blog, but do you think that as a species this will be a transformative period in our history because of this virus, or do you think it will go back to normal again?
I do think.
Well, I say normal. Sorry, normal is not the right word. Normal in quotations.
Yeah, I do think this will be a turning point. I think this is the biggest turning point in humanity since the Second World War. I think that some things have become quite obvious already. So the idea of us all flying around the world for business meetings and that sort of thing, we've seen very quickly that you and I can chat now. We've never met in person, but we can have a good conversation online as we are now. And people are doing this all around the world very quickly. Everyone's suddenly learned how to use Zoom and Microsoft Teams, and even
to different levels, I would say. It's been one of the most amusing things has been watching my mum try to navigate a house party and have meetings with her friends. The highlight of quarantine is definitely one of them.
Yeah, I think the more that people in the environmental sector talk about coronavirus as the opportunity, obviously it's a horrendous situation, but there's also a few aspects of the silver lining that we can look for and that we have to look for. And it's for us environmentalists to make sure that we do look for those positives and actually say there's certain things about our society which we don't need to go back to. Less travelling around, less flying around. Hopefully we can also raise awareness of the population issue. There's been a lot of awareness of the consumption issue, but a lot of people have been shying away from talking about the human overpopulation of our planet as well as being an underlying cause for most of our environmental problems. So we do need to talk about these things. There's sometimes difficult subjects and people sort of disagree with them, that kind of thing, but we've got to move on from disagreement, just as we've moved on from, and we've been very united actually by the coronavirus. We need, and I think the strongest point that has come about from coronavirus is the unification behind science. And with climate change, we need to unify behind science because it's a cause and effect relationship between the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and how warm that atmosphere is. And we need scientists to be leading on climate policy, not politicians leading on climate policy. And actually one of the questions that the alien asked me when we were traveling around the world was, why are politicians involved in climate policy? Because on the aliens planet, it's scientists that decide what to do about climate change and carbon emissions and energy policy.
Sounds like a good planet. Yeah, as it should be. And I think there's striking parallels between, you know, the Keeling curve of CO2 in the atmosphere and between the graphs we've been seeing with the rise in coronavirus, because there are windows of opportunity to act in, and there are sort of points where it grows exponentially and it becomes unmanageable. And there are many people now are talking about flattening the curve, and that's been welcomed into our dialogue in terms of the coronavirus. But scientists have been talking about this with the emissions curve for many years, and it's something which we need to be discussing as frequently as we are with the virus. So I think there are lots we can learn just in terms of the science behind the virus and how we're reacting to it.
Absolutely, the curve is a great visual for people to sort of latch onto, because Greta Thunberg's been talking for years about how the only thing that matters is bending that curve of carbon emissions. Nothing else matters. It doesn't matter about political opinions on left or right. It doesn't matter about whether the United States is in or out of the Paris Agreement. The only thing that matters is bending that curve. And people understand that very clearly now with coronavirus. We need to get that understanding and transfer it onto climate change, because it's a life or death issue as much as coronavirus is. Great, so we've talked about that a bit, but let's finish off with your song and your film in the third of your 3 alien places.
So the song for this one is Society by Eddie Vedder, and in the song he's sort of expressing his confusion at the way society works, how much people consume. And I think not only me, many people, especially young youth activists or campaigners, have felt confused about how the science exists, how people aren't listening to it. And yeah, this phrase, unite behind the science, has just been repeated and repeated. And in the environmental movement, many young people have said, we're not asking you to listen to us, we're asking you to listen to the science. And there's just been this confusion around how society is acting in a really dissonant way when the science is clear and the solutions exist as well. So I chose that song, and it's also a really great and beautiful song. And the film is The Ghost in Our Machine by Joanne MacArthur, and this film is exploring the relationship between humans and animals. So it goes back to what I was saying about how I think the wet market is symbolic of our haven't got coronavirus, don't worry, of our relationship with animals and how flawed that is. And this film does that. She goes to labs and factory farms and fur farms and just explores what went wrong and why are we treating other species, well, you know the phrase speciesism, where we treat other species very differently. And if it's a dog, we bring them up to our pedestal, and well, in the UK anyway, in much of the Western world. But if it's for example, a cow or some species of wild animals, then we think it's okay to exploit them. So the film is really exploring that and the reasons behind that. And it's something which we need to think about a lot more. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the alien here is, we communicate telepathically, by the way. So the alien's been asking me, just as you mentioned that, why do humans think that it's great to kind of make friends with a dog but eat a cow? And the alien's very confused about that. So it's a great film to show an alien to explore those issues.
I like how he's sort of telepathically streaming his thoughts through you. I
Yeah,
need to
that's
get
right.
an alien to. Perhaps then I wouldn't face hostility on Twitter. I could blame the alien for any controversial thoughts.
Yeah, we can blame it all on the alien
Yeah.
and just say that we're the conduits. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great. So that's three great places, really interesting, quite different. Three songs and three films there. Is there any kind of overarching kind of final thought that you'd like the alien to leave with, or do you think you've kind of covered most of the main points you'd like to communicate to an alien?
I hope that the alien, we don't even know if this alien's come to see us. It could have just come to see the beauty remaining on our planet. And I hope it leaves thinking that although we've caused a lot of destruction, and undoubtedly even the geological epoch's been labelled the Anthropocene because of how much devastation we've caused, I hope that it sees that there's a lot remaining, and there's a lot to fight for. And hopefully it will go back and they'll be a bit envious because, we have this really beautiful planet and we're about to go through a really transformative period and protect it. So it will be telling the rest of its alien friends that this species called Homo sapiens are about to change and change all their ways and protect the planet which they're inhabiting, because, they spend a lot of time thinking about life in other parts of the universe when really they have a lot on the little tiny blue dot which they inhabit. Blue and green dot.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, of course, the alien has been referring to our planet as ocean rather than Earth, actually, because as you can see on the globe behind me here, from an alien perspective, our planet is mostly ocean. So as we were going around the world tour, it was referring to the planet not as Earth, as ocean, because that's what it sees from a distance. And I can reveal that the alien sees itself as a conservation volunteer. So it's been coming to Earth to help humanity, which it sees as an endangered species. And that with a few specific actions, reducing climate change, having a better relationship with the natural world, then humanity does have a chance.
This is why it's a green alien.
Absolutely, yeah, that's why it's a green alien, yeah. Great, well, from the alien and me, Bella Lack, thank you very much for sharing with us your 3 alien places.
Thank you so much. Does the alien have any parting messages for humanity? Any lessons for us?
Yeah, well, I think the key message from the alien is to stop thinking like humans. So the alien, whenever I think like a human when we're having our telepathic chats, it always has a go at me for thinking anthropocentrically. So for thinking from a human perspective, and the alien's main message for us is think from a different perspective, unite behind the science, and remember that things like the atmosphere doesn't have a brain, doesn't have a personality. If you put carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, it will simply heat up. And so the alien is reminding us to remember to have that cause and effect relationship with our planet, to keep that in mind, and stop thinking from a human perspective. It's the main message I'm getting from the alien here.
Get this alien in the White House and then we'll be okay.
Yeah, I'll get Donald Trump onto alien places. How about that?
Yeah. Good luck with that. Thank you very much.
Okay, Bella Lack, thank you very much.
Bye-bye, thank you.